Hey everybody, this is Brad from Johnson Small Engines, better known as the One Hand Mechanic. If I can do it, you can too. Today we have here a Craftsman LT2000 that will not start. It cranks, but it won't start. It has a Kohler Pro 17.5 horsepower overhead valve. This is a Kohler Command engine. These are great motors. If taken care of, they'll last forever. Unfortunately, they stopped producing them. But anyway, a couple tools that you may need today. I always suggest always have a multimeter or a light. This is a test light, 12-volt test light, and a spark tester for your everyday, if you want to diagnose your own stuff. That's something I would put in your arsenal of tools. This is my clip tool that I use for taking a lot of things apart, which is great. And I threw this in here because we're definitely going to be at the spark plug today. This is a spark plug socket. It's a 5/8. You can use a deep or just a spark plug socket itself, and a 2.5 inch extension. Let's get started and we'll see why this thing cranks and doesn't start. First thing I would suggest checking is your gas cap, believe it or not. The gas cap vent right on top there, if it's not clear, this can actually shut your machine off while you're driving, and then it won't crank up until possibly a half an hour to an hour to the next day, and then it'll start right up and run for another 15 minutes. That's a big one that a lot of people miss. Also, you want to look inside the tank for any debris, and that has a lot of debris in there, and I can tell right now it's part of the gas cap. So this gas cap here is actually deteriorated. That's not good. We could have a clogged fuel line, and we'll have to check that. Okay, so that guy's gonna need a gas cap. Let's go ahead and crank this over and let's just see what goes on here and see. And also, while I'm just moving this away, you do wanna check the oil to make sure you don't have any gas in it. And you wanna wipe it off and check it. If you have fuel in your oil, I actually have a video on a Briggs that shows you why there's gas in my oil, and that's another video. Okay, I would say it's definitely, it's not quite, it's a little bit low, but it's okay for us to just to make sure it's gonna run or not. And then while we're here, we're gonna go ahead and check compression, which means that you're gonna spin over the engine and then you're gonna feel it get tight, and that's called the compression stroke, okay? And it is getting tight, and then you should be able to bump it past there. And I did, and then it's gonna get easy, and then it's gonna get hard again, like that. Okay, so I'm pretty sure we have good compression, and that's without using a compression gauge. And a lot of you guys out there, I don't want you to go out and buy a compression gauge just to check compression. So let's go ahead and crank it over and see what happens. Okay, so we get absolutely nothing. All right, so let's check spark real quick. I'm gonna take off the hood here. Just gonna unplug the lights and take the hood off, so we can get to the front spark plug. Here's your spark plug wire that goes down to your spark plug. And I would definitely suggest not yanking on this cable, because the spark plug wire cable, if you pull it off and it's rusted on the spark plug, it could pull the grommet off of the wire, and it'll be stuck to the end of the spark plug. So my tool here, this is a clip remover tool. I use it for everything. It just pops off the cap really nicely, and then you can get to it easily. I'm gonna go ahead and put my spark tester on, and a lot of people out there might have their opinions on spark testers, but I've been using this spark tester for quite a long time and it works just fine. So whatever spark tester you need to use, go ahead and use it. I'm gonna put all the parts and the links in the description below, and even if you have an engine that's full of fuel, I'll put a link on it's a Briggs & Stratton engine, but it's basically will give you the same concept. As far as checking the spark here now, you have to make sure that nothing's touching metal, especially the stuff that has metal sticking out. So we want to see if this flashes when we crank it over. And it flashes just fine. So at this point, I want to pull the spark plug out since we're there and see what the spark plug looks like. You got to do the easy stuff first. So always remember that. And I have another video on diagnosing a Craftsman engine. I think it's a Briggs and it won't start. A couple of them. I'll put them in the links in the description. All right, so that looks carbonated, but it looks brand new. I mean, there's literally, it doesn't look like it's been fired. Maybe I don't even know where he got this from. It looks like it's been in there for a little bit. Wonder how long this machine's been sitting. All right, so the spark plug looks good. I'm gonna go ahead and put it back in. And you have to be careful when you line up the threads with the spark plugs, especially in the Kohler Command engine. It's back there pretty far. You don't want to cross thread it. You'll have a lot of headaches after that if you do. All right, so we have spark. We have a good spark plug, it looks like. Now there is also, on a lot of these, there is a fuel shut-off solenoid down below the carburetor, right here. And this is electronic. Now when you turn, if you have the emergency brake on, you should be able to turn the key on and hear a click. Now the click has to come from this solenoid. Now I hear a click, but it's coming from above around the gas tank. So somewhere up here, all right, so they have this engine has, this Craftsman has relays in it. Some of the older Craftsmans had relays, and you're not gonna be able to see these relays, but there's relays behind this, and they're clicking. So that's not the click you're listening for, and I did not hear a click next to this carburetor. We'll go ahead and put the camera right next to it and see if we can hear it click. Yeah, it's not, I don't think it's clicking. All right, so at this point, I don't think the fuel shut-off solenoid is clicking. So I have to test the line that is actually going to the solenoid. This red one right here, we're gonna disconnect that. Let's see if we have power to it. And what you're checking is, I'm using my test light. I'm gonna ground my test light to the block, just like so. And by sticking the test light in here, and then you turn the key to the on position, that should light up, and it does. I'm turning it off and on, and that 12 volts should be going to this solenoid. What the fuel shut-off solenoid is for is when you turn the engine off, it was designed to help the backfiring, and it did mostly, but a lot of them didn't help at all with the backfiring. I'd suggest always throttle down and let it, idle for a couple seconds before you turn the machine off, and that helps a lot. But I don't think this is actually working. Let's try it again. And sometimes you can feel it. I don't feel anything. So we want to bring this down, and we have to pinch off the fuel line. So I'm using this is my fuel line crimper, and I got these from Harbor Freight. It was like a set of 3, but they're plastic. They won't hurt the fuel line. Now we're still going to have fuel coming down here. This is going to make a mess when you take this down. So be aware of that. If you have asphalt driveway that you're working on, gasoline does eat the asphalt. And I'm going to try to keep this up. If this gasket comes away from the bowl here, it can be a real pain to put on while the carburetor's on the machine. Disconnect this again, and we're gonna. You don't want to twist you don't want to twist the barrel here. You want to make sure you wrench it off, because you can actually, I think you can hurt it inside. I don't think I've ever done that before, but all right. So here comes the fuel, and it's going to drain the whole bowl. So you're going to get a good amount of fuel coming through here. And it looks like kind of doesn't seem like it's going up and down enough. Now a lot of guys out there are like, oh, can't you just clip this off? Well, technically, yes, you can clip that off and it should run. You can put this back up in there, but if this is bad, we're gonna put a kit in. Let's see if we can, you should just be able to ground this to the engine, turn the key on, and this should move. So it's a little bit tricky for me to do that, being that I'm across the ignition. Let's see if I can do this like this. So I'm gonna hold it to ground, gonna turn the key on. It is not working whatsoever. So I think that's gonna be our problem. Now, a lot of you guys out there are like, yes, you can snip this end off and put it back together again, but I am a repair shop and I do not wanna have this go out having to wonder if this guy's gonna have backfiring problems. This is a very old carburetor and a very old carburetor solenoid. You can no longer get this particular one. You might be able to get it in a aftermarket, but I don't like to use aftermarkets too much. But what I have found is this is a Kohler, genuine Kohler part. They went to a different kind of solenoid. Now this solenoid here, I know as a fact they use on a lot of different Briggs and Stratton engines. Not sure why Kohler went from this solenoid to that solenoid, and it must have been cost. But if you look at the front of this package, it says crafted in Mexico. We're We're a genuine Kohler product from Wisconsin, and it says crafted in Mexico. So what's that telling you? I'll just let you guys can make that decision. So this is a kit that we can use, and I'm going to try to keep the bowl right where it was because I don't want to mess up that gasket. Like I said, if that bowl comes down, you may have issues trying to get the gasket back up in there. Comes with directions, comes with everything you see right here. All right, so you should have everything we need to know. And for everybody out there, I'll put this in the link in the description below. It says here that if the harness needs to be changed, so it gives you everything to change it out. Now this is the new one, and as you can see, there's a lot more give with that one. That one works. This one here is kind of like stuck. It doesn't really move that well, and it wasn't working whatsoever. All right, they don't. Okay, I was going to say, where's the gasket? I was looking for the gasket. This is the gasket that goes. This gasket here. They give you a new one for the new one right here. I'm going to assume that the threads are identical, and yeah, it looks like the same. You never assume, but I always try to double check. Anyway, so we're going to screw this up into it, and by hand is okay until you get to it where it gets snug. And it looks like threads are just fine. Now it's starting to get snug. This is a 1/2-inch wrench that I actually ground down, and I did it just for this reason, so you guys might have to get creative. Now it's getting tight, and I don't like the fact that the plug is in the back. All right, now it's tight. Plug's in the back. I don't want to turn this. All right, usually the plug will be in the front. Now I don't want to over tighten this. It's as tight as I want to go. So you have the plug in. Let me take this back out again. Since we have it in a really weird spot, you're gonna push the plug up in there. I'm pretty sure it only goes in one way. We'll see here. It shouldn't matter because one's ground and one's hot, and yeah, it goes. Yeah, well, it went in better that way. Instructions really don't give you much to show, and they just tell you to plug it in. So we're gonna go ahead and plug it in. Then I'm gonna tighten it up, because we're not going to be able to see it. Okay. Now, since I have it tight, I'm going to go ahead and let the fuel out just to make sure that we don't have a leak. Now, as you can see the green wire here, this basically grounds the carburetor to the frame. This is the old style. Pretty sure that's an 8mm socket. We're going to take it off of here. I'm going to leave the ground wire there, but also we're going to put the new ground wire on here. This just eliminates you guys from having to take the carburetor off. So we're just going to go ahead and use them both. And that's not going to hurt anything at all. It's not going to affect the operation whatsoever. Make sure you got it tight. All right, so they do give you in the kit, they give you a brand new plug, and it looks like the plug is identical to the old plug that's on here. I would suggest now I don't like this too much, so what I think I'm gonna do is, yeah, we have plenty of lines, so what I'm gonna do, now you do have to worry about your cable hitting your governor arms here. So that's why they had it zip tied very tightly right here, so it's away from your governor arms. All right, and I'm gonna have to do the same thing again, but I'm not gonna have it as tight as they had it. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna actually snip this right here, and then I'm gonna put this on just because of the fact that I don't like the fact that we could have a problem with that in the future. So I'm gonna snip it above the problem. And the only reason why I'm doing this is because I know that we have extra cable right here, so we'll have plenty to play with. This is a little bit harder for me to do than you guys out there with two hands, which I can still do it, but just saying. So if you guys think you can't do something, trust me, you find a way to do it. Man, I'm just trying to get a little. All right, so there it is. We got a nice clean cut right there. Now they give you this, which is protected. It's a crimp on. It's not a solder. I'm going to actually get some heat shrink. Okay, so I have a little bit of heat shrink here. It's probably too much, but it's okay. It's not going to hurt anything. And I'm going to put this guy on all the way in. And then we're going to crimp it. Make sure you're crimped nice and tight. I always give it a good yank and make sure if it did come out, you're going to be in trouble. Hopefully you make sure you put it on there tight enough. And now, before I do everything, I want to turn the ignition key on to make sure we have power there. Okay, so we have power there and everything feels good. I'm going to go ahead and use a heat gun. Okay, so I'm going to use a little heat on this. Now that's going to be pretty hot for a few minutes here. We're going to let that cool down a little bit. We definitely have to make sure that we are not going to interfere. As you can see, it comes down from the engine, and you don't want it to interfere with your governor arm. We could zip tie it to the fuel line right there, and that would actually probably work out pretty well right there. I might put a little one on there. But we're going to go ahead and clamp this in here, like so. Now, I don't like the fact that this pushed in all the way and we're sitting out here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug it. I'm going to get another piece of heat shrink just to cover that bare metal. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit on here. I'm going to go ahead and plug it in again. At this point, you know, we're pretty much sure that it is the problem is the fuel shutoff solenoid, and we should really go ahead and test the engine to make sure it runs before we really get it all buttoned up here. I'm pretty confident this is going to be it because obviously the other one wasn't working. I'm trying to get the heat shrink to go up in there, and it's not quite small enough to go inside the other one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the heat shrink on here, and this was sticking out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have that right about there. I'm going to heat that on. Okay, so that's on there. I'm going to go ahead and plug this in. And at this point, I have to do it my way here, okay. Yeah, so at this point, we do have extra, but I don't like how, what I think I'm going to do is, I'm going to zip tie it to that fuel line because there's not a lot of room to zip tie it back to the solenoid. I mean, I could right there. I don't really want these connectors to be down there. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to zip tie it right here. And whatever works for you guys. I mean, just make sure it's not getting, you know, it's not getting in the way of anything because you have the choke rod here, you have your governor arm here. And I'm just going to put it, I'm going to zip tie it right to the fuel line right there. They actually do give you a zip tie with the kit, which is nice. I have learned that these are flush cut needle nose, and it'll allow you to get very close to the end of the zip tie, and so I understand that people get hurt with these little pieces sticking out, but with the flush cut wire cutters, you can get right in there and clip it off, and then you don't have any problems. They're really nice cutters. Okay, so we're looking good here. I mean, technically, you could put another zip tie here if you wanted to. If it looks good right now, I'll probably put one down here. Let's see if this thing runs. Up on choke. And there you have it. I'm sure you probably heard a little knocking from the valves. These are hydraulic lifters, and it takes a little while to get them pumped up sometimes. And also, it was a little bit low on oil. So that pretty much sums it up on how to install the shutoff solenoid kit from Kohler. I'll put everything in the link in the description below, but this is the kit itself right here. And yeah, that was it. It was a bad shutoff solenoid. Basically, we started from square one. We worked our way around to this. He is going to get a brand new gas cap. I am going to have to flush that tank out and take it off and remove it and get all the debris out. And he will get a new fuel filter also. So if you guys have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Please give this video a like. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Tell your friends about my channel. And I'll catch you guys on the next one.